The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. Today, I want to start this episode by asking you a question. I want to ask if you're someone that feels like you've always kind of struggled with diving into things, you've had these looping thoughts, these fears that just hold you back in life. If this sounds like you and it sounds like you're someone that maybe struggles with anxiety, this episode is absolutely for you. Let's welcome best-selling author Carrie Berk.
Hi,
Hi. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited to chat.
So let's just first get it out there. You have a best-selling book called Mindfire, and this
Yes.
book is talking all about anxiety.
Yes.
Is that
So
right? Okay.
Mindfire is basically a roadmap for anyone struggling with their mental health and looking for guidance and looking to feel less alone. It's
Okay.
primarily about my struggles going through anxiety, finding out I had anxiety and OCD. But like I mentioned, it really is a roadmap for other people struggling. I include self care tips for people. Each chapter is dedicated to a different emotion you might experience during anxiety, whether that's restlessness or grief or heartbreak, because anxiety can manifest in so many different ways. So, this is really my love letter to people who are struggling out there. And I wrote it because I really hope that people can read this and feel like they have a tool that they can use to strengthen their anxiety toolkit.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because it's definitely something that holds people back from big accomplishments in life or even just social settings, right? It's something that can hold us back from work, a lot of different parts. And so I think a roadmap is something that people absolutely need. But I want to talk about the backstory a little bit. So you said you did struggle with anxiety as a child, or there were signs. What did it feel like as a kid? I mean, as a kid, we don't really know what our feelings are, right? Like we don't even understand. I think about like my own daughter that's 3 and she doesn't actually understand hot and cold. Like she'll tell me she's so hot. And I'm like, that's not possible right now. Or I'm so cold. It's totally opposite. But what were the signs and the symptoms that you felt as a child?
I think mostly my OCD manifested pretty obviously as a child. When I was 8 years old, I felt like everything had to be even on both sides. So if I touched something with my right hand, I touched it with my left hand. And at the time, I made up a really silly name for it. I called it Qua Qua because I wanted it to sound like the silliest thing possible. And it almost just took some of the seriousness out of it because it
Mhm.
really was so debilitating. I mean, I couldn't leave the house if I didn't like tap my nightstand a certain number of times. So it just kind of took over my life. And those symptoms really subsided until I was 18 and I experienced other OCD symptoms. But you mentioned anxiety. When it comes to anxiety, I was always really nervous to sleep away from home and I couldn't like have a sleepover at a friend's house ever just because I freaked out that I wouldn't get any sleep. And if I didn't get any sleep, then I would have a bad day the next day. So there was just a lot of like catastrophizing as a really young girl.
I can understand that. I mean, as a child, I think I had anxiety at certain points, but they're also like, for me, I'm super empathic. So I think I also took on everybody else's anxiety that was in the room. But I want to ask you, so when you're saying you did all these things, did they bring you comfort? Did it actually help you, or was it
I
just
mean,
making it a deeper problem?
I think in the long term, it makes it a deeper problem. So in the short term, it felt good. It was like temporary relief, but it's not good in the long run. Yeah. So in the long run, like it's not good because you're teaching your brain, for example, that sleeping at someone's house is dangerous and
Mhm.
scary and just like creating this false narrative in your head for no reason. And the same with the OCD habits, even though in the moment it felt like I wasn't going to have a good day or things were not going to go my way if I didn't tap a nightstand a certain number of times. It was relieving in the moment, but it was, like, teaching me bad habits so
Mhm.
that when I was older, if I continued those habits for a long time, I would not be set up for success as someone who's older, especially,
Mhm.
like, with sleeping away from home. How would I ever go on vacations with a significant other or go away to college? So, it was not good in the long run, but in the moment, I was just thinking about the short term and making myself feel better in that moment.
Did you eventually stop doing things? Like, so it sounds like for a while you did things like you did the tapping and you did different things to help yourself like push through, get through, and still make it happen.
Mhm.
But did you eventually get to this point where it just became so crippling where you just kind of, I don't want to say gave up, but almost gave up and just didn't do certain things?
So for the OCD in particular, I was, like, almost fed up. So that's kind of a good way you described it. I was, like, angry at myself, and one day I said, "If you don't stop doing this, you're gonna lose people you love because you're
Oh,
just spending way too much time on this."
yeah.
And that was enough to make me stop that. And then with
Where did you get that thought, do you think?
I think, well, this is a different story, but now now having gotten OCD education and being, like, way more educated on the topic than I was back then, I feel like that in itself was actually an OCD way of going about it, and I'll
Mhm.
explain why. Um, with OCD, there's something called magical thinking, and
Mhm.
basically you convince yourself if I keep doing this, then I'm gonna have, like, bad luck, or if I keep thinking this thought, I'm gonna have good luck, and I was almost doing that in the reverse, like, if I keep tapping this nightstand, then I'm gonna lose the people I love,
It's like
and
a self-manipulation.
it's like a superstition, like, creating a
Mhm.
superstition for myself, and it's wrong. There's no correlation between tapping a nightstand and
No.
good luck or bad luck or losing people you love. But at the time, that was enough for eight-year-old me to shake out of it. So eight-year-old me was very smart, but if I had that, thank goodness I don't have those symptoms now. But now, like being in therapy, I understand like that's not really a good way to get out of it. It's not really teaching your brain proper thinking pattern.
So that leads me to the next question of how do you deal with anxiety before it hits and during? So, if you're about to go into a situation where you have this anticipation and you kind of know that it's something that is ultimately probably going to lead to anxious thoughts for you, what do you do prior? And then do you do something differently when you're in the moment and anxiety hits?
So it's all about building your toolkit and knowing exactly how you're going to handle anxiety when it arises. Because even if you don't have an anxiety diagnosis, if you're not anxious prone, you never know what life can throw at you. And you always
Mhm.
have to be prepared for a mental health crisis. So some of the tools I like incorporating into my toolkit are using your five senses. You can do that anywhere, naming five things you see, hear, smell around you, also, moving your body. If anxiety strikes and you're at a dinner, get up, go to the bathroom, take a walk. If you're not as busy, go out, go on a run, take a yoga class. Moving your body is just a surefire way to boost endorphins. You can do journaling, meditation. I mean, there's so many things. It's just a matter of, I guess, experimenting with those things beforehand, seeing what works best for you so that you know what your soothing stations are in your life, and you can
So
visit
how
those stations.
I want to ask though how this is different from tapping the nightstand because like from what I'm hearing, it's like I'm soothing myself in some way or another. I'm journaling. I'm bringing this piece of calm to myself. And if tapping your nightstand brought you a piece of calm, how is that not a good piece of your toolkit? I'm just trying to help
It's
people understand.
I think for 3 reasons. 1, it's not debilitating. Going out on a run does not make your life feel like there's a sense of doom and dread and that it's taking over your entire existence. It's just something you do in the moment. I
Mhm.
think number 2 is it's logical. I'm gonna keep with the running example. This is something that's genuinely good for you, and it's a real thing, and, running is medically, scientifically proven to help boost endorphins. Tapping your nightstand doesn't do anything for you. And I think number 3 is just productivity. I think tapping a nightstand is not productive. It does nothing for your mental, physical, emotional well-being, and you should fuel your body with things that support all of those things. So, running is a great one. Using your 5 senses can boost your mental health in the moment.
Mhm.
Tapping a nightstand doesn't boost your mental health, it worsens it.
So when you're talking about journaling, then there's got to be some sort of specific topic or something you should write on.
You can honestly just write nonsense over and over again. The act of just sitting down and taking the time to be alone with your thoughts and getting out what's in your mind can be very meditative and very beneficial for your mental health.
Okay. So, what has been your biggest aha moment in helping yourself with anxiety?
I think realizing that it's not going to get better and you just get stronger. There's no finish line with anxiety. There's no medal you get at the end telling you, congratulations, you're cured. There's none of that. You just have to learn how to live with it so that when it does arise, you're well equipped, you have that toolkit ready to go. And that's, I think, when you're the strongest version of yourself. People are boring if they don't have their struggles. The fact that I have had such lows in my life already just means that the highs are going to be that much better. And it's hard to think that in the moment when you're going through anxiety. You don't want to hear it. But I think in retrospect now, I'm really looking back and it feels okay to have anxiety. It's not as alarming to me anymore.
So, you're saying you'll never cure it, but do you feel like situations that you've pushed through become easier because you've witnessed yourself push through them?
Yeah, I think you learn by living through it. I think the more you have a panic attack, for example, the more accustomed you come to it and the less scary it becomes next time you have it because you learn, oh, I've had this before. Yeah, it sucks, but I also know it's going to get better. So I'm going to let myself cry. I'm going to let myself hyperventilate. But I also know that in 10 minutes or so, I'm going to be back to normal. So let's just
Mhm.
ride it out.
Okay. And when it comes to certain situations where people feel really anxious, they don't necessarily know why, how can they figure out if the anxiety is something they should actually really like tune into? Like, oh, shoot, maybe this is actually coming from a gut feeling of something bad is coming, or versus just like, I am fearful.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times anxiety doesn't necessarily have an explicit trigger. And that's one of the huge misunderstandings surrounding anxiety. A lot of the times we want to say, I feel anxious because this or because this. And when we can't find that because, we can't find that reason, it makes us feel even more frustrated and even more anxious. So, what I recommend is to stop searching for a why and just
Mm,
allow yourself to exist in your anxiety. Being a human and eating, sleeping, and breathing as a human is enough of a reason to be anxious. You don't need to find your why. So I would say, yeah, just stop chasing a why and just live.
interesting. I'm a big why person. I've been through a lot of different major health things, and for me, the why has always uncovered so much more that has helped me on such a deep level. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying though, and I think it depends on the situation for sure.
I mean,
Uh,
when you're in therapy, unpacking in therapy, your anxiety and your intrusive thoughts can be helpful, but I think in the moment when you're in an anxious spell, the last thing you want to do is
Yeah.
send yourself into a deeper anxious spell and driving yourself crazy, searching through all of these situations as to why you're feeling that way is not going to be helpful.
I agree. There's definitely a time and a place, but I also found it really interesting when you were talking about how the highs can be so much higher. And then I also know that's also something that puts people into a deep depression is people that have really high highs and really
Mhm.
low lows because their expectations are so high. And then when they're not met, they sink so far further than they've sunk before. And so it's really interesting. I think there's that happy medium that you have to find in that balance.
Everyone always returns to balance at the end of the day. Like you could feel that peak of high, but you can't be up there forever and you
No.
can't be down low forever. So I would just say enjoy the highs while you have them, live in the lows while you have them. And either way, whether you're really high or really low, you're always going to come back to that happy medium and that balance. Most of our lives are meant to be lived at that balance. If the
Right.
scale is too far in either direction,
Mhm.
like you said, once you do hit that low, it's gonna be even more drastic than if you're
Mhm.
just riding the middle because you have
Mhm.
less ways to go.
Do you have any mantras that you think are really helpful and good for people to tell themselves when they're too high or when they're too low to get themselves back to that middle ground, to that balance?
Mhm. I mean, when you're low, the one thing I tell myself is everything is always gonna be okay, and I'm not a big mantras girl, but that's, like, the one thing that I repeat to myself. And when you're too high, I don't think you need to force yourself back down. I think just live in it. You're going to return to balance naturally. But if something's going well in your life, don't search for anxiety or search for a reason
No.
to come down. Like live in it, enjoy it.
Yeah. It's more that you don't wanna fall from that place. You wanna, like, recognize the high, but also remember that state of balance and be okay with that and not change your expectations of life to that high, right? So then
Yeah.
you don't feel the fall necessarily.
I think
Uh,
when you hit the balance, let's say you just had the high and then you felt you're back at balance and you're like, oh, shoot, I'm back at balance. I don't feel as good as I did before. Maybe just reminding yourself that life is not meant to be lived on that high
yeah,
24/7. You'll get back there eventually, but constantly being up there is not going to make life very fun. Like what makes it fun is the ups and the downs and then
yeah,
living in between. I'm thinking of, like, a graph from math class in my mind right
yeah,
now, the with the parabolas and then, like, the line in between.
yeah. No, I agree. Life you have to see that life is great when it's really high, but it's also really great when it's not, and that's a really
Mm,
key thing for people to see in their lives is see the greatness at every point of your life.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah. So, I have a question. When you wrote the book
You're like, "I have another question."
I have a question. I have so many questions here.
Yes.
When you wrote the book, did you feel anxiety writing the book thinking, "This is gonna bring a lot of attention, people are gonna have a lot of questions, I'm gonna have to put myself out there." Did that bring
Mm,
anxiety? And if so, how do you take on things knowing I'm signing up for this and it's bringing me anxiety?
I think for the most part, no, because writing has always been so therapeutic for me. I almost felt free. I felt like all these feelings I've been bottling up that feel so taboo are no longer taboo because I'm looking at them on the page and they're less scary.
What
So
okay, so what are those taboo thoughts?
so that's like kind of that whole the whole other story. I talk about in my book basically the my worst time in 2020 when I had OCD. I was getting these harm OCD thoughts where I managed to convince myself that I was destined to self-harm because I had a friend that also self-harmed and she also had anxiety. And my brain just like created this false narrative for myself.
Okay.
And it took me a really long time to kind of get through those intrusive thoughts and recognize them as OCD and not things that I aligned with because I didn't want to harm myself and I didn't believe in them at all. But for a long time, I was scared to write about that or even tell a single person because I knew they wouldn't understand. But
Mhm.
the second I started writing, I realized that I wasn't the only one, that I was going to be helping a lot of people out there who go through the exact same thing, but are misunderstood because OCD is not represented like that in the media. It's cleaning, it's organization, it's not taboo, intrusive thoughts.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, this is bringing me back to my own situation of I struggled with depression for a very long time and suicidal thoughts, and I don't even know how long I kept that in with myself. It was one of those things where you feel like if you tell people, they're gonna just immediately think you're crazy. Like you're nuts, you're a psychopath. And I think that's just what the media portrays. Like anybody that has these feelings of not wanting to be here or feeling depressed and having these thoughts, you're just kind of a crazy person because
Mhm.
you can't keep it together. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really awesome that you're sharing all this and speaking out about it so people can
Yeah.
not
I
feel so
will
alone.
say though, I say this with importance and with emphasis and with exclamation points. There is a difference between thoughts about suicide and intrusive thoughts about suicide. If
Okay.
you have intrusive thoughts about suicide related to OCD, that means you do not align with the thoughts. They scare you. They're counter to everything you value and what you believe. You're so debilitated by the thought because it's the opposite of what you want and because the fact that it's there in the first place scares you. For people who actually suffer from suicidal thoughts, it's a welcome thought to them. It's something that in their mind, they're like, oh, I really don't want to be here right now. Like the thought of ending my life brings me peace. So there's peace and there's fear.
Mhm.
One of intrusive thoughts about suicide, there's fear.
Mm.
Thoughts about suicide, peace. So I think that's a really important distinction to make and something that's very misunderstood about OCD and why so many people aren't speaking out about intrusive thoughts, about self-harm, about a lot of people have intrusive thoughts about pedophilia, like crazy, like taboo things in logical life,
Mhm.
but they're having these thoughts, they're contrary to what they believe. I
Are
just want
they
that distinction.
No, I think that's really important, and that's definitely yeah, that was something I battled with, like, not understanding it's like you're saying, I guess there was maybe an anxiety component to it because I didn't understand why I felt that way. It was like, I see everybody so happy, I wanna feel that way, like, I wanted different for myself, I really did, but then, like you're saying, it was just these intrusive thoughts that were just coming at me, just kind of thinking, well, like, what if these thoughts would just go away? What if I could feel peace in a different way? Yeah, depression is a very complicated thing. Yeah, that's really interesting you're sharing that. But
Yeah,
what
if you think about an intrusive thought about self-harm, like I mentioned, it's contrary to what you believe, it scares you, like it's not something that you want. There's this term that I learned in therapy, it's called ego dystonic. Basically believes like it's contrary to everything you want and what you believe in. And also, like, you can be just as debilitated by it as someone who actually wants to end their life. That's why the line kind of gets blurry. And if I like went to a friend at the time and I said, "Hey, I'm having these intrusive thoughts about killing myself," they'd be like, "Oh, are you okay? Like, do I need to like take you to a hospital?" And I'm like, "No, no, no. Like, you don't understand. Like,
yeah.
I love my life, like, everything is great, I just can't stop thinking about it, and that's where the OCD component comes in. You're obsessing over the thought, you're compulsively telling to yourself over and over again why you don't believe in the thought, why you want to keep your life, like, all of these things. So, it's it's a very, like, thin, blurry line, but
Mhm.
there is a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear that. I wanted to be happy. I didn't know how to be happy. And like you're saying, I was like, my life is so good. Like I saw all the good in my life. Believe me, I did. But I also didn't understand. I was like, but like, why am I also I'm not feeling it. I see it and I understand it, but I'm not feeling it. It just and then eventually came to understand like through cognitive behavioral therapy, just the brain training that we get from our outside environment, whether it's teachers, peers, parents, whatever it be, like you learn how to talk to yourself. And I had a lot of negative self talk that was happening. And so even though I understood and saw that I had such a good life, somewhere along the way, my brain was trained to kind of diminish my value with myself.
Yeah.
And that's what set me there.
Mhm. That's I think something a lot of people struggle with, feeling like their life is great, nothing's wrong, and then all of a sudden, boom, a thought hits. It makes no sense. It's opposite to everything you want and what you believe in. And that's when you kind of have to recognize it in
Mhm.
that moment. And that's why cognitive behavioral therapy is so helpful because we're talking through it, because we're recognizing these thought patterns and identifying them as irregular thought patterns before we start getting so deep into it that we're basically drowning in these illogical thoughts.
Mhm. With your book, what chapter do you think is the most helpful and why? Like, what's in this chapter?
Um,
It's an entire book, and I'm thinking a whole book on anxiety. Like, there's got to be something in
yeah.
there that, like, this chapter's gold. Like, this stuff is great for you to hear and read, but there's a chapter that's just gold.
Okay, so the each chapter is dedicated to a different emotion you experience when you're going through anxiety, as I mentioned.
Okay.
I think I have 2 favorites. I like the grief chapter a lot because I think when we're grieving someone, it becomes very much about the person who passed, as it should,
Mhm.
but we're not owning our own emotions enough, and we're pushing them down to the point where they eventually can boil over or come up years later and make us feel just the same grieving emotions all over again. So I talk about losing my grandma and losing my grandma while also dealing with those
Yeah.
self-harm thoughts and how that played into going to a funeral. And it's just like really complex emotions. And I feel like anyone who's grieving a loved one needs to read that because it makes them feel seen in a way that maybe I didn't feel so seen at the time because I was busy helping everyone else, writing the eulogy for my mom, like all that stuff.
Mhm.
For that, and then also the last chapter called Progress. I think it's really interesting because anxiety we associate with all these negative emotions like grief, heartbreak, rage of the other ones, loneliness.
Do you talk about grief in the sense of I think some people have to grieve their thoughts of who they were going to become because as
Without
life
the person.
evolves. What?
Without the person, like who they're gonna become without the person.
Well, the loss of a person, but just in general, sometimes our lives go a different direction than planned, and maybe your career doesn't go the way you thought it was going to be. And so I think sometimes people have to just grieve that loss of who they thought they were going to become, or even a divorce, right? Like
Yeah.
you were a partnership with somebody, and now you're no longer that, and now you're solely an individual. And I feel like people have to have that process a little bit of
100%.
just grieving.
Well, there's heartbreak. You see some grief in my
Okay.
heartbreak chapter where it almost feels like you're losing a loved one, where you're
Mhm.
grieving someone. So, yes, grief comes up, I think, in several different ways throughout the book. That chapter is about like death in particular. And I would say my favorite chapter is that last chapter,
Progress.
Progress, because a lot of times we associate anxiety with these negative emotions like loneliness, grief, heartbreak, but anxiety can coexist with progress and growth and positive emotions too. So I think that's a really important reminder for people. You don't have to be in a depression, you don't have to be in bed crying to feel anxious. You can be thriving and publishing books and also, like, be anxious. So, I like that chapter. I feel like the last few pages are pretty special. I talk about, like, praying a little bit, and I'm not a religious person, but when I was closing this book and I kind of, like, looked inwards, I realized that when things get really, really bad, like, when I just feel, like, awful, like, everything's quiet, I pray, and I'd never told anyone that before, and it just felt like the perfect vulnerable way to close the book
Mhm.
and tell people, like, at the end of the day, you always have God, you always have a higher power that you believe in. And beyond that, you always have yourself and everything's going to
Mhm.
be okay.
Yeah, I love that. So that kind of leads me to a question of what thoughts are not helpful for you? I mean,
Mhm.
you're talking about all these ways to help yourself, do this, but like, what do you not do? There's certain thoughts and things. I mean, obviously, you're saying don't tap your nightstand. Uh,
Yeah.
but, like, what thoughts do we have within ourselves that are not helpful that we should try to stop?
Any intrusive thought that is opposite to what you believe in is not helpful to harp on, period. It doesn't matter what the theme is. If it's something that you don't align with, that's taking over your day, it is a garbage thought and it's not meant to be harped on.
I love
So,
that garbage thought.
yeah.
Garbage.
So,
Throw it away.
yeah, throw it away. That's generally speaking. And besides that, anything like self-deprecating, telling yourself things aren't gonna get better, that you're gonna be anxious forever, anything putting you down is never helpful.
But how do people even recognize that? Because like I said, like I did not even recognize until I went to a therapist, until I started kind of getting deep within my head and my own thought process and really hearing myself. Like I didn't realize how hard I was on myself until I was like deep in the therapy. And then I realized it was so constant. Like it'd just be doing something in the kitchen, making something. And if I, spilled something, I'd be like, oh my gosh, you idiot. And it was just like, wow, like I have these constant little things that I say to myself that are just not kind. So do you have any ways? I know that's kind of a hard question, but like, do you have any ways that people can kind of turn that light bulb on?
Well, you have to make a deliberate effort to practice mindfulness. I think people listening to this can use it as their sign to pay attention to the way you speak to yourself. Flip
Mhm.
that light switch right now. Don't wait for that moment where you may or may not catch yourself saying something mean to yourself. Tell yourself right now, okay, next time I'm in the kitchen and cooking, if I make a mistake, it's going to be fine. I'm going to wipe it up. I'm going to take a deep breath. So make that choice right now.
Yeah, I agree. Make the choice. And then it sounds like what you're saying is basically practice reframing after you say
Yeah,
things that are negative in your head, reframe it immediately to something positive so you can start training your brain to think and speak differently to yourself.
exactly. And I also think if you're treating yourself badly, you're going to notice it a little bit and in that you might not be productive. So you'll be going to bed that night and you'll ask yourself, what did I really do today? Was I sitting on my couch staring at the ceiling? Or did I read a few pages of my book? Did I go on a walk? And when you're in bed reflecting on your day and you realize that you really didn't get anything done, you'll be aware. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to acknowledge it and make a difference.
Mhm,
But I believe people will know if they're not being as nice to themselves as they should.
mhm. So I want to ask you if you want to be super, super vulnerable. And I want to ask you if you can share your darkest day, because I think what helps people so much when they're listening is to be like, wow, I've been there too. And so even though you're sharing that, yes, I've been there and I've struggled and here's how I did it, when people really connect, it's when we share like that exact moment and those exact thoughts and what happened, what led up to it.
Yeah, I share a lot of those darkest moments in Mindfire, to be honest. I think the one that comes to mind was just the moment I realized I needed help with my OCD. I was riding my Peloton bike and I just felt like my Peloton was going to be my escape from those intrusive thoughts about self-harm. I wasn't going to have them. I was just going to like enjoy my ride, but I was so fully like submerged in those thoughts that
Mhm.
not even my favorite ride with my favorite instructor could provide an escape, and I just felt, like, so hopeless, and I just collapsed over my bike and cried in the middle of the class, and I called my mom over, and I said, "I don't know what to do. I think I need to see a therapist," and it's I think this is important too, that a lot of times people can be forced into therapy before they're ready.
Mhm.
And people ask me, "Do you wish you went to therapy sooner when you were struggling?" Like, I started struggling 2 months before that, and I think my parents could have forced me into therapy, but it wouldn't have been as productive. But in that moment, I genuinely needed help,
Mhm.
and that was, like, a huge turning point for me, and it set me on a really long, hard path to facing my thoughts head on.
Mhm.
But also, if I didn't do that, then I would have never gotten my OCD diagnosis, and, like, who knows what could have happened.
Yeah. Well, I always say, like, you can need something in your life, but it doesn't mean you want it. And if
Mhm.
you don't want it, you're not gonna utilize it. And so I think that's a really important thing. And what I hear you saying is you just kind of felt underwater. And can you share with people what are other thoughts that you would feel or people can kind of recognize that they really need help? Because I think some people will listen and they'll think, "Eh, I'm a little bit anxious, but like, I got this." And it's like, what?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to reach my point to ask for help. Like, I reached the point where I'd felt like I'd officially, like, hit the ground, and I did not know how to get up anymore, and that's when I needed help. But you can be feeling yourself falling, I guess, toward the ground and ask for
Mhm.
help.
Okay.
So, I think just, like, listening to yourself and I mean, I was, like, sitting in bed staring at the ceiling, crying all day long, like, I could have gotten help then, but I was scared of therapy. I'd never seen a therapist for anxiety before, I didn't really understand.
Mhm.
And I waited until I'd hit the ground and crashed, but I think a lot of people can kind of resolve that sooner, and as soon as
Mhm.
they feel themselves falling, to recognize it and to get the help that they need.
I think it can be scary though when you think about going to therapy and you think about the world that you're living in and how scared you are and thinking
Yeah.
about being vulnerable and sharing all that's going on. I think there's hesitancy for a lot of people. They don't want to share what's really going through their minds because it's scary. The thoughts are
Yes.
very intrusive or and like or if they feel like they have this image with their friends or just people in the world, they don't wanna look weak or they don't wanna look crazy or whatever it be, and so
Mhm.
even though it's just one person, it's just that therapist, I think it can be really hard for people to get vulnerable and open up for the sake of helping and saving themselves.
Yeah, the big thing for me was that it was opening up to a stranger. I think that's what bothered me the most. This wasn't a friend, this wasn't my parents. This was a stranger, and I wanted her to really get to know me and understand who I am and who I was at the time before giving me her professional advice. And it took a lot of courage. And for a lot of people, it will take a lot of courage. But if you want to get better, you need to trust the professional. And at the time, I was struggling so bad. I needed to put my faith in a professional because there was nowhere else I could really turn but do that. So it was the only option, it felt like at the time.
Yeah. So, earlier you were talking about just kind of accepting it's not gonna
Mhm.
get better. And so for people that have this fear of whatever their fear is, when they accept it, do you think that's the best way they can deal with it? Do you think they should see a therapist? Like, do you think just acceptance is enough?
I think it's depends on the person. It
Mhm.
depends on the gravity of the thoughts. If it's something as deep as a self-harm intrusive thought, you might
Okay,
need to
yeah.
see a therapist and, like, understand what it is. Like, I had no idea, and I had to kind of go through a learning curve, and a lot of people out there probably need to do the same.
Yeah.
So, is acceptance enough? Maybe, maybe not. I think
Mhm.
therapy is helpful for anyone. Cognitive behavioral therapy is helpful for anyone, regardless of whether they suffer from anxiety or not. But the goal, along with therapy, is to accept your anxiety for what it is, let the intrusive thoughts flow, and learn to desensitize yourself to whatever darkness that's illogical that's going on in your mind. Like, when I was having those self-harm thoughts, when I was in therapy, she would have me, like, think about them for a certain amount of time under her supervision and allow myself to become fully submerged in the thought
Mhm.
and then move on with my day after that. And that itself would desensitize me because I realized that I could allow the thought to completely take over my head without pushing it down, as I would do every day. And then after that, I would move on with my life. I would make dinner, I would watch a movie, I would still be okay. And learning to live with the thought is really how I set myself up for recovery.
Did you feel like as you sat with that thought and really actually sat with it and went into it, you realized, like, actually don't really believe that? Like any of
Yeah.
like
I
some
think,
of our thoughts or some of them, it's like, oh, actually, no, I don't fully believe that.
I mean, in the moment, I was I was scared. I don't know if I recognized in the moment, like, "Oh, this is silly." Like, no, I was scared. I was just, like, teary and shaking and, like, felt panic attacks coming on because it was something that disturbed me so much, and I was allowing it to, like, take over my whole life.
Mhm.
So, it felt scary. I think the the way it became silly is through time and realizing that I could allow it to take over. I could feel the panic, I could feel the anxiety. But then afterward, I would watch a movie with my mom and life would go on and nobody hurt themselves. Nobody wanted to. Thought could be there and it could be bothersome, but it didn't mean action. It didn't mean truth. And that took time to realize.
The last question. Managing your anxiety and going through all this, can you share how it's led to success?
Turning pain into productivity is something I always live by, and it was very helpful in 2020 when I was going through everything. I was blowing up on TikTok at the time. I always say social media was my lifeline, just connecting with other people online. But even now in everyday life, I'm connecting with so many people through Mindfire, learning other people's stories. And just as I've helped them, they're helping me.
But now I have another question because, I mean, I didn't know if you wanted to bring it up, but when it comes to social media and being on TikTok and being on Instagram and being a face on social media, like, how do you put yourself out there as an anxious person? Like, I feel like that's a lot for an anxious person to put themselves out there on social media, or do you just kind of drop it and run? Like drop it,
Yeah.
"Okay, I'm out. I'm never going to read the comments. I'm out."
So a lot of people have anxiety based on social media. For some reason, I have never been that person. I'm a very unique case. I
Okay.
love it. I feel like it's part of my livelihood, obviously. It's part of my business. And during the pandemic, it really was such a lifeline for me, connecting with people and fans online and being creative. So I see the good in it. I don't necessarily compare myself to people online because I know that so much of it is fake, but I can see why a lot of people kind of go down that rabbit hole of comparison and feeling anxious about what they put out there. And my advice to those people would just be to find balance and again, practice mindfulness. If you find yourself going through that rabbit hole, make that deliberate choice to get off of social media, close your phone, go do something else immediately. And again, you have to make that decision yourself. You have to practice mindfulness. No one's going to tell you in that moment. You have to be ready for when it comes up, if that's you.
Do you have a favorite way? Sorry, more questions. Do you have a favorite way to practice mindfulness?
Running.
Just running.
Yeah, I just go out. I go out on a run and I think about anything and everything.
Okay. Mine is in the shower. I just like to zone
That's
out in the
do that
shower.
too.
Yeah, just let the water hit me. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you? Where can they find your book? Your book is called Mindfire Diary of an Anxious, what is it? Anxious
20
20,
something.
yeah, 20 something.
That's me. Uh,
Carrie.
yeah, so Mindfire, it's right here because I was looking at the chapter name. Mindfire, Diary of an Anxious 20 something is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, basically anywhere
Everywhere.
you get books.
Okay. And if people want to follow you on social media,
Oh, it's just at Carrie Berk. That's super simple with an extra K. So
oh,
simple
okay.
twist.
Yeah. Well, I like it. Thank you so much for sharing.